Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Kent. I am the Reverend Renee Rahutsky. I serve as field staff at our National Unitarian Universalist Association, known as the UUA, and I'm also an affiliated community minister with this congregation. Thank you for joining us this morning, both in person and on Zoom. A spiritual community that seeks to be diverse and inclusive as we inspire love, work for justice, and grow together in community. Let us take a moment to center ourselves in the present moment, to enter into this time of community once again, to invite the spirit of radical love to be present among us as we explore the power and possibility of creativity during this time of dismay. Come, let us worship together.
Make a building, a bank and a school and a lot of other buildings make a town, a river and a road and a lot of little towns make a county, capital and industry and lots of other counties make a state. But what makes it grand, what makes it great, when we help each other and cooperate, shoulder to shoulder, sisters and brothers and others, building up each other, building community. Then the state of our union won't be a state of confusion, but a friendly communion, a place where you and me can live in harmony like a happy family. It's only human to serve humanity. I respect, you respect me. We respect each other. Stand up for each other's rights like a sister or a brother. Never hesitate. Reach out a hand to help another. Build up each other instead of tearing down, down, down. Then it won't just be a bunch of buildings. It won't just be a bunch of towns. It won't just be a bunch of states, it will be something much more great. And the state of our union won't be a state of confusion, but a friendly communion, a place where you and me can live in harmony like a happy family. You know it's only human to serve humanity. From the state of Maine to the Golden Gate, from the Carolines to the Bering Strait, and from Hawaii to the Buckeye State, a friendly communion. We need to learn to cooperate. Let's start today, 'cause it's never too early or late. Then love and harmony will be the state of our union. Then love and harmony will be the state of our union.
I have been a devotee of end of the world as we know it stories ever since I watched The Planet of the Apes at the drive-in theater from the back seat of my parents' station wagon. Some stories are cautionary tales, like the dystopian Handmaid's Tale. But the books I really like are the ones about how humans come together afterward to create community after some sort of collapse. Stephen King's book, The Stand, makes the choice stark. Do survivors follow the benevolent and inclusive Mother Abigail or the violent strong man, Randall Flagg? Ever since November of 2016, I have been feeling like we are in a dystopian novel, in the early chapters, speeding toward an abyss with violent strongmen taking turns at the throttle. But I have also been finding hope in a future, in a newer genre of stories called Afrofuturism, that imagine communities grounded in values and ideals that are not steeped in colonialism and white supremacy. These stories offer patterns for what can be possible in community, patterns that allow for the thriving of humanity beyond systems of violent domination. Come, let us explore and imagine together. I invite Stella up to light our chalice. The chalice is a symbol of the cup of community and the flame of hope. As Stella lights our shared chalice, I invite you who are on Zoom to light your home chalice. Please join our voices to form the words of the covenant from James Villa Blake. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our time for all ages today is Westlandia by Paul Fleischman, illustrated by Kevin Hawkes. Of course he's miserable, moaned Wesley's mother. He sticks out like a nose, snapped his father. Listening through the hearing vent, Wesley knew they were right. He was an outcast from the civilization around him. He alone in his town disliked pizza and soda, alarming his mother and the school nurse. He found professional football stupid. He refused to shave half his head, the hairstyle worn by all the other boys, despite his father's bribe of $5. Passing his neighborhood's two styles of housing, garage on the left and garage on the right, Wesley alone dreamed of more exciting forms of shelter. He had no friends, but plenty of tormentors. Fleeing them was the only sport he was good at. Each afternoon, his mother asked him what he learned in school that day. That seeds are carried a great distance by the wind, he answered on Wednesday. That each civilization had its own staple food crop, he answered on Thursday. That school's over and I should find a good summer project, he answered on Friday. As always, his father mumbled, "I'm sure you'll use this knowledge often." Suddenly, Wesley's thoughts shot sparks. His eyes blazed. His father was right. He could actually use what he learned that week for a summer project that would top all others. He would grow his own staple food crop and found his own civilization. The next morning, he turned over a plot of ground in his yard. That night, a wind blew in from the west. It raced through the trees and set his curtains snapping. Wesley lay awake listening. His land was being planted. 5 days later, the first seedlings appeared. "You'll have almighty bedlam on your hands if you don't get those weeds out," warned his neighbor. "Actually, that's my crop," replied Wesley. "In this type of garden, there are no weeds." Following ancient tradition, Wesley's fellow gardeners grew tomatoes, beans, Brussels sprouts, and nothing else. Wesley found it thrilling to open his land to chance, inviting the new and the unknown. The plants shot up past his knees, then his waist. They seemed to be all of the same sort. Wesley couldn't find them in any plant book. "Are those tomatoes, beans, or Brussels sprouts?" asked Wesley's neighbor. "None of the above," replied Wesley. Fruit appeared, yellow at first, then blushing to magenta. Wesley picked one and sliced through the rind to the juicy purple center. He took a bite and found the taste to be an entrancing blend of peach, strawberry, pumpkin pie, and flavors he had no names for. Ignoring the shelf of cereals in the kitchen, Wesley took to breakfasting on the fruit. He dried half a rind to serve as a cup, built his own squeezing device, and drank the fruit's juice throughout the day. Pulling up a plant, he found large tubers on the roots. These he boiled, fried, or roasted on the family barbecue, seasoning them with a pinch of the plant's highly aromatic leaves. It was hot work tending to his crop. To keep off the sun, Wesley wove himself a hat from strips of the plant's woody bark. His success with the hat inspired him to devise a spinning wheel and a loom on which he wove a loose-fitting robe from the stalk's soft inner fibers. Unlike jeans, which he found scratchy and heavy, the robe was comfortable, reflected the sun, and offered myriad opportunities for pockets. His schoolmates were scornful, then curious. Grudgingly, Wesley allowed them 10 minutes apiece at his mortar, crushing the plant's seeds to collect the oil. The oil had a tangy scent and served him both as suntan lotion and mosquito repellent. He rubbed it on his face each morning and sold small amounts to his former tormentors at the price of $10 per bottle. "What happened to your watch?" his mother asked one day. Wesley admitted that he no longer wore it. He told time by the stalk that he used as a sundial and had divided his day into 8 segments, the number of petals on the plant's flowers. He adopted a new counting system as well, based likewise on the number 8. His domain, home to many such innovations, he named Westlandia. Uninterested in traditional sports, Wesley made up his own. These were designed for a single player and used many different parts of the plant. His spectators looked on with envy. Realizing that more players would offer him more scope, Wesley invented other games that would include his schoolmates, games rich with strategy and complex scoring systems. He tried to be patient with the other players' blunders. August was unusually hot. Wesley built himself a platform and took to sleeping in the middle of Westlandia. He passed the evenings playing a flute he fashioned from a stalk, or gazing up at the sky, renaming the constellations. His parents noted Wesley's improved morale. "It's the first time in years he's looked happy," said his mother. Wesley gave them a tour of Westlandia. "What do you call this plant?" his father asked. Not knowing its name, Wesley had begun calling it Swist, from the sound of its leaves rustling in the breeze. In like manner, he named his new fabrics, games, and foods until he created an entire language. Mixing the plant's oil with soot, Wesley made a passable ink. As the finale to a summer project, he used the ink and his own 80-letter alphabet to record the history of his civilization's founding. In September, Wesley returned to school. He had no shortage of friends. The end. So at this time, the children are welcome to either stay in the back in color or leave with Wendy, to leave with Trudy. So either way is great, and take it away.
Well, we're going to play, am I on? We're going to sing a song that a lot of you know from bygone years. You've got the light of love inside you to sing the children out to their classes. And it goes, "You've got the light of love inside you. Go on your way in peace. So shine that light. This whole world now awaits you. Go on your way in peace. You know we hold you, we hold you." So everybody sings on the first verse, and then on the second verse, the children go out. So join me if you like. You've got the light of love inside you. Go on your way in peace. So shine that light. This whole world now awaits you. Go on your way in peace. You've got the light of love inside you. Go on your way in peace. So shine that light. This whole world now awaits you. Go on your way in peace. You know we hold you. We hold you. Yes, we hold you.
Each week when we gather for worship, we take time to share sorrows, struggles, and losses that are heavy in our hearts. For our online participants who wish to share, please use the chat box. We share the sorrow of Anne Verweeby, who is thinking of Susan, whose father passed this weekend, and Karen and Jackson, who laid their husband and father to rest yesterday. Kat Holt shares that her mother is declining quickly with her cancer. Kat, we hold you and your family in that tender time. Carol Weigard offers prayers for better health for our beloved Hal Walker. Donna Craver-Dean says that with sadness that their family sent their Scraggle old cat, baby kitty, to his rest. Kai Yost shares that a dear friend passed away last week from pancreatic cancer. She was a beautiful light in this world. Love you forever, Wanda. Kai, we are also holding you and your friends and family in that tender place of grief. Spirit of life and love, God of our hearts that holds us in difficult times. Let us grieve well and deeply and in love surrounding us. Let us care for one another during difficult times. Let us know that each one of us has burdens, sometimes light, sometimes bone-crushingly heavy. Let us know that we are held in a larger love, a larger light, that we all give to with our deepest hearts and love and receive from, feeling the grace and mercy and compassion of the larger love that is the universe. Amen, and blessed be. As we prepare for a time of stillness and meditation together, let me share this haiku. Anxious mind chatters, planet quakes, heart breaks, soul aches. Share silence, seek peace. Let us seek peace as we share stillness together.
What wondrous
will sing. To love and to all friends I will sing. To love and to all friends who pain and sorrow meant, with thanks unto the end, I will sing, I will sing. With thanks unto the end, I will sing.
Each week, we also take time to share celebrations, joys, and milestones. Please use the chat box for you on Zoom to share your celebrations. We celebrate with Carol Gould, who is out of the hospital with a new and wonderful back. Hooray, Carol. Todd Packer and Wendy Mann are sharing a milestone and a joy as they are celebrating their 16th wedding anniversary this weekend. So hooray for Todd and Wendy. And again, I'll take a few moments to see if there are any from our friends on Zoom. One blessing of the pandemic is that we're able to include people both near and far, and that for me is a true joy. So not seeing any, oh, well, here we go. Donna and the family are thankful that their dog Bodie returned after getting out of the gate. And those of us who are on Facebook kind of saw the drama as it was unfolding, so we're all very happy as well. With gratitude for these and every blessing we receive in life, for the gift of life itself, for the companionship of one another on life's journey, for the hope and possibilities we discover together, we say amen. Our first reading this morning is from the book This Here Flesh, Spirituality, Liberations, and the Stories That Make Us by Cole Arthur Riley. And this is from the chapter called Belonging. My father encountered the social conditions of the school bus far too late in life. In Manhattan, they walked or took the city bus. So when he moved to Pittsburgh, he knew nothing of the grim habitat of adolescent angst and dominion that made up this strange, yellow-encased society. He was unprepared. Back then, Pittsburgh was black and white, and kids didn't know how to place his honey skin and Bronx accent. He sat alone and told himself he wasn't afraid. He was small, scrawny, and mixed. And for it all, he endured precisely 3 days of teasing. But on the third day, a meteor fell from the sky and stopped the bud dead in its tracks. And the glowing rock climbed on the bus and looked him right in the eyes, and everyone seemed to know the rock and wanted to be chosen by it. And they couldn't stop staring. And before anyone could ever say another word about my father's curly hair or the way he talked, the rock rolled up onto the seat next to him and said, "Hey, I'm Corey." My father soon learned that no one messes with meteors, and he also learned that he was one of the few people who knew how to touch him and not get burned. And Corey soon learned that my father had a magic tongue and limbs that could cast spells. A new gravity enshrouded them both, a cosmic tether that would not be easily overcome. At the intersection of belonging and choice, you'll often find friendship. It's that rare bond in which attachment feels so much like a risk because its origin lies in the bond itself. In households, the bond is situated in the home. Neighbors create communities bonded by proximity, block parties, and borrowing sugar. Families have the bond of lineage, the stories that formed your great-grandmother's cornbread recipe. Friendship can, of course, be found in the home, neighborhood, or blood, but it doesn't necessarily begin there. We feel a distant longing for this out of our longing to be chosen. That is not to say the bonds of choice are necessarily more important, but perhaps, just like bonds of fate or location, they nourish a particular part of the soul. Each day, Corey chose my father, and my father chose him. They were reminded that they were wanted and worth wanting. I think the terror of bonds of friendship is that just as they can be chosen, they can be unchosen. You might say this of all bonds, but in friendship, the risk is perhaps felt most acutely. I'm convinced that in most bonds, it is not conflict we fear, it is abandonment after conflict. For this reason, we can become cruelest to those who we know will stay, and we resort to flattery or appeasement for those who we are uncertain will do so. This can lead us to drink from shallow waters. Durable friendship endures both truth-telling and conflict. When your standing is always at stake in the group, it fosters assimilation and competition. When the uncertainty is great, you will not find community, but cult, where a sense of deep alienation meets the poisoned possibility of belonging through the death of selfhood. Cults may appear to exercise community, but it is a community that does not stand for each of its members. Cults stand only on behalf of a single member, and it is never reciprocal. At the opposite end from the spectrum of the spectrum from cults, you'll find communities of true solidarity, groups that stand together and would do so for even its weakest member. It is that community which resists the intoxicating lie of individualism, that we live for ourselves and by ourselves. Solidarity dismisses self-preservation in favor of a new way, to sense the injustice, need, or glory of any one part as the unflinching responsibility of the collective. The second reading is from an article called How to Change the Course of Human History, at least the part that's already happened, by David Graeber and David Wengrow. Modern authors tend to use prehistory as a canvas for working out philosophical problems. Are humans fundamentally good or evil, cooperative or competitive, egalitarian or hierarchical? As a result, they also tend to write as if 95% of our species' history, human societies were all pretty much the same. But it seems inherently likely that those same pioneering humans who colonized much of the planet also experimented with an enormous variety of social arrangements. In fact, most were probably more conscious of society's potential than people generally are today, switching back and forth between different forms of organization every year. Rather than idling in some sort of primordial innocence until the genie of inequality was somehow unlocked, our prehistoric ancestors seem to have successfully opened and shut the bottle on a regular basis, confining inequality to ritual costume dramas, constructing gods and kingdoms as they did their monuments, then cheerfully dismissing them once again. And so, the real question is not, what are the origins of social inequality, but, having lived so much of our history moving back and forth between different political systems, how did we get so stuck? Information is now pouring in from almost every quarter of the globe based on careful empirical fieldwork. And almost all of this new research goes against the familiar narrative of world history. Here are a few headlines to give a sense of what the new emerging world history is starting to look like. 1, there actually was no discernible switch from Paleolithic forager to Neolithic farmer. The transition from living mainly on wild resources to a life based on food production typically took something in the order of 3,000 years. it no longer makes any sense to use phrases like the agricultural revolution. 2, another bombshell. Civilization does not come as a package. The world's first cities did not just emerge in a handful of locations, together with systems of centralized government and bureaucratic control. There is mounting evidence that the first cities were organized on self-consciously egalitarian lines, municipal courts retaining significant autonomy from a central government. Cities with sophisticated civic infrastructures flourished for over a half a millennium with no trace of royal burials or monuments, no standing armies or other means of large-scale coercion, nor any hint of direct bureaucratic control over most citizens' lives. 3, there is absolutely no evidence that top-down structures of rule are the necessary consequence of large-scale organization. It is simply not true that ruling classes, once established, cannot be gotten rid of except by general catastrophe. To take just one well-documented example, around 200 AD, the city of Teotihuacan in the Valley of Mexico, with a population of 120,000, appears to have undergone a profound transformation, turning its back on pyramid temples and human sacrifice, and reconstructing itself as a vast collection of comfortable villas, all almost exactly the same size. 4, today, almost everyone insists that participatory democracy or social equality can work in a small community or activist group that cannot possibly scale up to anything like a city, a region, or a nation state. But the archaeological record suggests the opposite. Egalitarian cities, even regional confederacies, are historically quite commonplace. Egalitarian families and households are not. Once the historic verdict is in, we will see that the most painful loss of human freedoms begins at the small scale, the level of gender relations, age groups, and domestic servitude. The kind of relationships that contain at once the greatest intimacy and the deepest forms of structural violence. If we really want to understand how it first became acceptable for some to turn wealth into power and for others to end up being told their needs and their lives don't count, it is here that we should look. Last summer, I volunteered at 2 similar but very different weekend events. Both were hosted by groups who care about the earth, and both offered workshops to help people live ecologically. The first event was hosted by a nonprofit who had hoped to build its membership and make a little money from the event fees plus a silent auction. Their organization was hierarchical, and the event tended to privilege the insiders and the leaders. The second event was organized by an organically organized group, with several people sharing leadership. There was no entrance fee, but they had a jar for donations from the participants, which more than covered the event costs. The participants started the day with a circle where everyone introduced themselves. The organizers then shared some norms around consent and using people's preferred pronouns. We felt welcomed and at ease. The opening set the stage for a sense of belonging among a group that included strangers as well as people who already knew each other well. Ironically, I was on the planning team of the first event in hope of creating a sense of community that I only experienced at the second event. My lesson? The culture of hierarchy and exclusion was stronger than my strategies of inclusion. By the way, that second event was a Reads and Roots Skillshare. We have a couple of organizers here. I loved it in that pop-up community so much that I and several others are helping to organize one here next month. Watch the newsletter for more information. I love being in a diverse community. I love being surrounded by people with different experiences, ideas, and identities, but with shared values and sense of justice. That's what drew me into this congregation almost 30 years ago. We are trying to create our version of the beloved community. More and more, the idea of beloved community is an act of radical resistance to that deeply ingrained systems of oppression, extraction, and exploitation that date back thousands of years. We have inherited a culture that conflates violence with care, giving us adages like spare the rod and spoil the child, kill the Indian to save the man, and numerous other examples of tough love. We have inherited a culture that equates value with wealth and freedom as freedom to extract as much wealth as we can, whether it be from the minerals below the ground, the factory farm animals that are kept crowded and confined for maximum profit, or the underpaid workers who can't afford rent. We have inherited a culture where we rank ourselves based on who is further down the ladder. All of these cultural dysfunctions are contributing to the unraveling of democracy and society. The good news is that our radical resistance is becoming more focused because it is becoming grounded in a counter-narrative that the oppressors fear so much that they are doing everything that they can to discredit it. Why do you think the culture wars are focusing on critical race theory? It's because more and more people are developing a nuanced and complex understanding around structural racism. When people start understanding how the system has been rigged against Black, Indigenous, and people of color, they also start seeing how it is rigged against most white people as well. Why do you think the culture wars are going after our trans children? When people start understanding that we can step out of the frame of patriarchy and God-ordained gender roles, the whole house of cards that is oppression will start to collapse in on itself. Our Unitarian Universalist movement has been shifting our own narrative because we are learning to center and listen to voices that have been on the margins of Unitarian Universalism. Voices from Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer, trans, and others. By engaging with conversations around adopting an eighth principle, where we commit to dismantle racism as a core value, we are naming that anti-racism is essential to our spiritual wholeness. By expanding our understanding of covenant to include a culture of consent and mutuality, we are creating spaces that are welcoming and safe to the marginalized. By questioning gender binaries, we are also creating space for relationships outside of traditional gender roles and the power dynamics that are often inherent in them. The fierce and cruel backlash that we are seeing right now is because deconstructing race and class and gender is actually threatening the status quo. Our culture is rigged to make us unsatisfied with who we are unless we can lord it over someone else. It's rigged to make us think we are missing out if we don't travel, go to shows, or buy the latest gadget. It's rigged to keep us alienated from one another. It's rigged to perpetuate and favor coercion and violence. Even though we make strides politically through a law here or there, I am doubting that we are going to be able to legislate our way out of our underlying cultural causes. But I do have hope. Culture can be changed. We can shape the future. In her book, Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Marie Brown shares several principles that I have been using to guide my own community organizing and activism. One of the most important principles is that we build resilience by building relationship. It is much more important to foster critical connections one at a time, rather than think that we need to make a large number of looser connections to achieve some sort of critical mass. If you're familiar with community organizing, the concept is familiar. The power of one-on-one conversations has a proven track record. We already know that what we do at the personal level can have a ripple effect into the larger culture. I think that is what we are doing in liberal religious community and other religious communities as well in some ways. We are building relationships with one another within a culture of inclusion and belonging. But more is required of us as UUs because we are a covenantal community. We have created bonds of choice, of friendship, bonds that require that we not abandon one another during or after conflict. Critical connections require critical conversations, especially across difference. There will be conflict. We need to be able to live in that tension. In a couple of hours, I and a few of you will be heading to our region's Summer Institute, affectionately known as SI. It is a week-long family camp held on a college campus. The week is full of worship, workshops, and lots of singing, eating, and playing together with other Unitarian Universalists from all over the region. It's also a week when we practice living in covenantal community based on our UU values. Spending what I call slow time together also builds trust and relationship. I believe that this congregation is strong because we spend a lot of slow time together, playing games, sharing meals, camping, and having a large group of us attend SI so that we get to practice covenant in other contexts. This practice of traveling for a gathering of various communities to build relationship and reinforce shared values seems to be older than written history. I've spent the better part of the past year working my way through this book. The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity, by archaeologist David Wengrow and anthropologist David Graeber. The archaeological evidence shows the pendulum swinging between humans living in egalitarian societies at one end, and at the other end, having a king or a ruling class. Times with kings result in a period of enslaving people to build monuments and of demanding tribute of material goods and human sacrifice. Eventually, the people rebel, overthrow the overlords, and go back to egalitarian practices, or at least practices where they are not enslaved or sacrificed. Eventually, humans learned that they needed to develop ingrained resistance to the human tendencies to amass power and wealth. Later, egalitarian networks of communities came together regularly, probably at solstices and equinoxes, to participate in rituals and games that intentionally reinforced their egalitarian culture. These rituals and games were intended to help these egalitarian communities develop alternatives to hierarchy and war, so that there would be less opportunity for some strong man to gain power and take away their freedom. Wengrow and Graeber posit that the Serpent Mounds and other mounds in southwest Ohio were the places where first peoples refined their shared understandings of hospitality to travelers. They learned how to manage disagreements, and they learned how to discourage amassing wealth. One example is the practice of the potlatch, where possessions were given away or destroyed by those who had the most wealth in a community. Eventually, the elements that reinforced the desired egalitarian culture became embedded in the practices and the habits of the various tribes and clans. What's especially interesting to me is that they did not use conformity as a tool. The artifacts from the mound sites show multiple variations of hairstyle and dress among all the participants. They somehow figured out how to reinforce values of equality while honoring diversity. There's no way that we can know what was going on in the minds of those indigenous people, but it sure sounds like they were clear-eyed about the human capacity for violence and oppression and their desire for equity and inclusion across difference. I think there is an important lesson for human nature here, an important theological lesson that asks us to refine our understanding of universalism. One tendency of universalism is to wear rose-colored glasses that assume basic human goodness. This can impair our perception of problematic behaviors in the early stages when they can be nipped in the bud. Rose-colored glasses can also cause us to hope for some magical moment where someone who is causing harm will suddenly do the right thing without any sort of intervention. My own understanding of universalism is that each one of us is worthy of God's love and redemption. But there is a tragic gap between the joy and transformation that is possible when we live in that love and the reality of our current state of layered oppressions and violence. I think that we too need to be clear-eyed about the human capacity for violence and oppression as we work toward equity and inclusion across difference. We need to reshape our culture so that oppression is no longer the norm, and that those who try to become overlords instead become pariahs. The big question is how. That is our work, friends. We are creating Emergent Community. All of the small interactions that we have with one another and with our family, friends, neighbors, and acquaintances have a ripple effect. Each time we ask for consent before offering a hug, each time we ask, "Is this conversation interesting to you?" before launching into another topic or story, each time we say, "You know, that comment really hurt my feelings. Can we talk about it?" Each time we model the small behaviors of mutuality and care, we are nudging the culture. And because the nudges are coming from 1,000 little interactions, the backlash is powerless to stop it. This is where I find hope. My faith is in every one of you living into the beloved community of our imagination and dreaming. May it be so, and amen. One way we care for one another is by supporting the institutions that help us create the kind of world that we want to live in. We give our personal money to institutions like this congregation, and in turn, our congregation supports the wider Unitarian Universalist Association. This year, we are celebrating our 10th year of being an honor congregation. We also give to agencies and organizations in Kent and beyond that serve those in need. July's special offering is in support of Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio. Their mission is simple: care no matter what. Our ushers will now receive the offering from those with us in person, starting at the back. Those online can follow the instructions on the screen. We are grateful for your generosity.
Strong is what we make each other, with the power of a hand in the hand of another. Gathering now, sing it all together. We're building a world of love, and we're given these mountains to climb. The road is long and the path treacherous. Together we're sounding a cry, searching for the light at the top of the hill. Circle is the way we lift each other, arm in arm we're bound together. Living from the heart, our love is delivered, and we're held by the hands of God. And we're walking this long trodden road, lifted by the light of the truth in the universe, singing these old songs of hope. Every step we're learning the way. When I'm walking all alone, I can feel the weight on my shoulder. Weary and I'm old, and this road just gets longer. When I'm reaching out a hand, you're proving it over and over. You make me understand that with love we get stronger. what we make each other. Circling now, stronger together. Family, foe, friend, or neighbor, our vision is a world of love. And we're given these mountains to climb. The road is long and the path treacherous. Together we're sounding the cry, searching for the light at the top of the hill. And we're given these mountains to climb. The road is long and the path treacherous. Together we're sounding the cry, searching for the light at the top of the hill.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. May we carry these in our hearts and minds until we are together again. With hearts in solidarity, we go forth to inspire love, seek justice, and to grow in community. Amen, and blessed be.
A place for you wherever you may go. We'll sustain this home of faith and love you've come to know. Go in peace, bring hope to hearts that yearn. We will keep a place for you till you return. Smiles and sighs of days gone by are blessings we hold dear. Voices now a memory call softly to us here. Go in peace, bring hope to hearts that yearn. We will keep a place for you till you